Hey you all, Farmer Jesse here, going to give you a rundown of our new farm that we started back in December. I kind of want to show you some of the different things we have going on, some of the challenges that we've faced on a new property, yeah, all the good things. So let's do it. First things first, if you're not subscribed to this channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you are subscribed, you're awesome. And you may also know the story if you're subscribed. So here's the thing, my wife and I moved recently to a new farm. We brought the kids, it was always a good idea. So the new farm is about 10 minutes away from our old farm, but the land shrank a little bit. We went from 13 acres down to like roughly 6 on this new property, but the amount of acreage that we're opening up is gonna be a little bit more. We were at about 3/4 of an acre. I think by this time next year, we'll be almost at a full acre of production. We're probably at about 3/4 that we've gotten opened up since December. And I wanna show you all the different pieces and parts and some of the challenges that we've had, some of the things that have gone really well, and some of the different trials that we're doing in terms of starting new gardens, and yeah, all the good things. So first thing I want to show you is the garlic patch, and I want to go over there and talk a little bit about living pathways as well, because that's become a very big part of what we're doing. So this is our garlic patch. We plant, I forget it. I think it's about 7,000 bulbs this year. We're going to go up to, actually that's wrong. I think it's about 4,500 bulbs this year. We're going to go up to about 10,000 by next spring, and we just plant a lot of garlic. We really love it. It's a great crop. So I want to talk about the garlic, and I also want to incorporate that a little bit with our living pathways situation. So the garlic is about a week from harvest for us, thereabouts. Want about 50% dried stalks, and that is usually our indicator of when we start pulling it. And we've been pulling and selling fresh garlic. That we do that early on in the spring. But the thing with this is it's a really long season crop, and we've allowed a lot of the violets to just remain. We've been cultivating out any grasses and that sort of thing, but the violets that are there, it's not a really intense crop. It doesn't grow very tall. It doesn't challenge the garlic that much. We've kind of just let that be sort of a perennial cover crop for the moment, although we will be removing that when the garlic comes out. But this has been like a really nice patch for a lot of reasons. It's been super successful, but the other thing with that is that we kept our living pathways in here inside of the garlic patch. And one of the big challenges with that has been that for all the really fast turnover crops, the carrots, the lettuces, the beets, all that stuff, living pathways have been great, which is kind of a surprise to me because I thought it would be a little bit more intensive. But for the long season crops, you do have to figure out good management techniques for those edges. And I talked about living pathways in that video that we'll link right up here. But the challenges have been that you just slowly get this creep, and you just have a harder time getting those edges if you don't establish them really early. So that's been some of the challenges with living pathways, but I also want to talk about how much I love the living pathways in our gardens. They've made our farm sort of feel like a park, and we kind of want to keep going in that direction, make it feel like a place that's comfortable to be, to hang out, I don't know, to have a picnic or something. We really love how this place feels with the living pathways specifically. All right, so this is kind of what I was talking about. Just this whole field of, nice green living pathways, tons of just what I love, the photosynthesis, just mass amount of photosynthesis going on at all times. And it's not as hard to manage these as I thought. Going into the summer, I thought this is when it's really gonna be the test of figuring out how to keep these out of the pathways, because we've done them with corn and we've done them with taller crops like okra, but with smaller crops and lettuces and more tender crops, this is definitely the first really go at it. And it's been successful, but it's very much for our context. We've had a ton of rain, and one of the things I want to talk about in a second is the drainage issues that we've run into, and how in some ways the living pathways have been very helpful in keeping those drainage issues from being even worse, because they're utilizing that water. They're both releasing it through evapotranspiration, and they're also utilizing it through putting carbon into the soil. But yeah, anyway, so I want to go over there and show you just one of the sections that's been really hard for us, because the drainage issues have been out of control, and I talked about that in another video, but it's better to just look at it and see the whole thing. So behind me is the kind of first plot that we set up, and it is also the plot that we've had the hardest time with, because drainage. So I talked about this in another video. We found drainage tile draining right into this garden, and I'm going to show you a couple crops, but you can probably see a little bit behind me where the squash and zucchini are. They kind of slope off and get kind of small. They're small plants. They haven't been as successful. that's where the drainage is the worst. And you can see it both in the pathways, it's like muddy, and it's really interesting because we bought a slope. Like, we farm on a pretty good slope here, and it's not, none of it drains. And originally I set up the beds going across the slope to kind of capture some of that water, especially in the summertime. And I think in retrospect, I maybe should have set these up so pointing a little bit more downhill. And we may over time change that. But honestly, one of the things that we're thinking about with this plot is moving more towards perennials like blueberries and elderberries and those sorts of things that survive a little bit better on a deeper moisture content. Like the blueberries that we put in early this spring down here at the bottom of the hill are actually thriving. So that gives me some indication that it would be a really good idea to just plant a lot of these beds instead of trying to force them into what I want them to do, planting them into a crop that already kind of enjoys that environment. Obviously blueberries like drainage, but this improve the drainage a little bit, but also know that it's always kind of going to be wet. So yeah, let me show you a specific example with those squash, get a little closer to that. So this is what I was talking about with the squash. You can see that it's kind of small, there's a little bit of chlorosis, a little yellowing leaf, and then it gets a little bit bigger, same with the zucchini. And you can tell like it hasn't rained in a few days. It rained for 13 days in a row, but it hasn't rained for a few days, and it's still just like complete mud down here. You can see it's just dripping out, and that's, you know, it's been really tough, and we've broad forked these. We've tried to open them up and allow that water to escape, but there's just a massive amount of water kind of coming down this hill and landing and just sitting in this spot. Some of the things we've done to kind of help these come out of this a little bit is we've done some nutrient applications over top. And because when a plant is not photosynthesizing well, which is not when you can see that sort of yellowing, you can help it along a little bit by adding nutrient applications. So that's basically been our only line of defense in trying to keep these alive. But we've had, you know, good squash and good zucchini off that end, but this end has been rough. And another thing we lost during that period of rain, we lost 3 beds of carrots that we had to pull early just to, you know, to be able to retain some amount of income from those beds. So trying to figure out this plot has been an enormous challenge, just because you don't expect to have something on a slope that has pretty good soil to be this poorly drained. Interplanting is obviously as alive and well on this farm as it was on our last farm, and we're still doing things like tomatoes with lettuce and tomatoes with onions, the sort of normal stuff that you've always seen on this channel. But one of the things that's changed is we've gone to 4-foot beds. So we've tried a couple of different kinds of interplants, and specifically one that we started developing on 30-inch beds, but have really pushed more on the 4-foot beds because they make sense for the space that we're using. So let me show you that. All right, so behind me, you can see several different interplantings that we're doing. And the one that's really come out of this the most is the 2 on my left side, which are what I'm calling like the split bed interplant. So this would be like lettuce on the top there, and then you see beets. But before that, it was beets on the top and lettuce on the bottom. Or in this case, it's lettuce here that is about to come out, but then below me is lettuce again, but was originally beets. So basically we're taking the bed and we're planting 2 different kinds of crops in them, and then we're switching those, or we're adding, it's always this rotation of carrots, lettuce, beets, or green onions, and that's kind of the rotation. So if it's one of those previous crops, it's the next one in that line. Or there's also, we're still doing these kind of experiments too, where it's, you know, in this case we have 3 different varieties, you know, lettuce, green onions, and fennel. This has been good too, but one of the challenges we found with this on the 4-foot bed is it's just really hard to reach over and get, you know, all the lettuce out of this. Whereas on these split beds, you're only using half the bed, so it's almost like having 2 24-inch beds in the same area. So it's something I've been playing with a lot, and I really like it because you can plant lettuce on either side of you as you go, and then you can harvest lettuce on either side of you as you go. So you can basically harvest a full bed in half the time. The next thing I want to show you is something that I'm trialing to kind of develop more ideas about cover cropping, or places where you don't have a lot of access to compost, different kind of no-till systems that are maybe more simplified and not as dependent on things like compost. So let's talk about that. So this is a plot that I'm kind of excited about in some ways, and also like it makes me, it's a little bit unnerving because this is the only plot that I have that doesn't actually have any sort of mulch on it. And originally we did it this way, sort of in a, what we did was we ran the chickens through, and then we plowed it up and made the raised beds because we want to raise all of our beds for drainage issues. But then we didn't, at the moment, have a lot of money for capital for more compost. Like, we've already poured a ton of capital into this farm, and I kind of just had the realization, like, I'll bet a lot of people are in a position where they don't have a lot of money to buy a lot of compost, don't have good access to compost, or maybe in situations where, they just don't have a lot of mulches around or can't afford them. And I was like, well, maybe this is an inspiration to start developing systems that don't rely as heavily on compost, which is something that we are rich in here in Kentucky, but not everybody is. So what we're doing here is, this is the last time it will ever be plowed, but we plowed this whole plot, and we're managing it without a mulch. Except for I do have some living mulches planted with this corn, and we could talk about that in a second. But basically, we're going to manage 4 plots for long season crops for garlic, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and corn, sweet corn specifically, and a couple other things, peanuts and some others. But we're going to manage all of those in cover crop. So we're going to try to go from essentially not a compost base to doing cover crop base, like trying to get that to be the main mulch. And like I said with the corn, so this is sweet corn, there's some popcorn here, but these 2 beds are sweet corn. And then there's some peanuts and some dry beans that we're doing. But the thing with this is we planted sweet alyssum underneath of the corn, and we also put clover in the pathways. So we're trying to also play around a little bit more with having some living mulches and some living plants underneath, just to cover the soil, to armor it, because I think that's necessary. With these other ones, these are big crops. Like, these are going to be crops that take over the bed. Specifically, sweet potatoes are going to take over the majority of this. So there will be a sort of living mulch on top of the surface in about a month. But it's kind of a challenge when you come from a world of, like, wanting to keep everything mulched and everything, clean for your moisture retention, to a place where you have moisture issues, and also where you are, in this case, pretending that I don't have a lot of access to mulch. So that's one of the big things that we're trialing, that I'm kind of excited about, to see how that develops in these 4 plots, and just using winter cover crops and also like summer cover crops to add that mulch to it. This is the hedge wedge. This is what I'm calling the hedge wedge. I talked about this a little bit with Josh Satin. He did a little farm tour early on to show what our farm looked like, and that's on his channel. So we'll link that above, and he's here helping me shoot this video now. But this is the hedge wedge, and the hedge wedge is essentially a wedge that we put in the garden when we needed to change the direction of the beds. So coming up this way, we didn't really need to angle them downhill, just be based on the way that they were pointing originally. But as we got higher up the slope, we started to have to angle the beds downhill more so that the water would run out. So in the middle, we had this kind of awkward wedge that we've deemed the hedge wedge. So we've started putting in mostly annual flowers now to make room for some of the perennial flowers, the yarrow and thyme and all the things that we planted underneath. So the goal there being the annual flowers take over this year. Next year, the perennials will come through and kind of take over the bed. But yeah, we have bird houses. Mostly tree swallows have been in here so far. We just love this, like, having a little pollinator area right in the middle. And then those are also edible flowers. So there's like borage and nasturtium, and there's also going to be some tall marigolds and those sorts of things. So just having a nice little diversity of flowers here for pollinators and all the different things, and right in the middle of the garden. We actually have 2 of these. The other one has mostly, actually has a line of peppers around it with sunflowers in the middle. There's a persimmon tree in the middle with some comfrey. So it's going to be the same thing, where there's going to be annuals planted for a little while, and then it'll sort of make way for the perennials. Behind me is the sort of propagation house that we threw up in January. And basically, I wanted something kind of temporary but effective, because we're still, you'll see this in a second, but we're building 2 tunnels. We're building kind of 96 by 22 tunnels. There's a rimhole greenhouse frame that you can see there. But what we're doing with this is I put in the barrels that we had at our old farm, placed some bars on top just to put our plant starts, and then also planted a row of double-liter cherry tomatoes down the middle, just to have our early cherry tomatoes come out of this tunnel. It's a little bit cramped in here, obviously, but same thing that we always do with that we've been doing the last couple of years, is the sweet alyssum. Got this from Daniel Mays. I love this trick. Is the sweet alyssum underneath, some basil in there too, but then also, yeah, some the cherry tomatoes on a double-liter system, and then yeah, use the rest for propagation, and that's been relatively effective. Like I said, we're gonna build like a legit, green prop house, but this has been, sometimes you can get away with a lot with just having some good cover, some good heat retention in the thermal mass in the barrels, And yeah, just like a decent space and decent access to water can do a lot for plant starts. Last thing I want to show you is our wash pack station, and yeah, well, let's do that. This is the wash pack station. I wanted to show this because I'm really excited about this building, and also just kind of like leaning up a little bit our wash pack stuff. You saw in that video about our new root washer. That's outside, and then inside we acquired a lot of stainless over this winter because there's a lot of stainless available, unfortunately because of restaurants going out of business. But we were able to acquire a bunch of stainless, so we got, you know, a 3-bay wash sink, and we've got several stainless tables, and that's just helping us to be able to figure out exactly what flow we want. Right now, everything's, you know, greens are coming in, setting on these tables, and then they're going down the line to the spinner, and then to being packed on that final table back there, and then going into the cooler that we also got this winter. And I think also because not a lot of restaurants were, you know, starting or anything like that, and some restaurants were going out of business. So we were able to find pretty reasonable 8 by 8 by 9 foot tall. So we've got a lot of space up front. It's maybe not as wide and deep as we want it, but it is very tall, so we can go up pretty high. And then we're running that off a CoolBot. But like I said, this building is ultimately going to be half wash pack and half farm store. So that's one of the big things that we wanted this specific farm for. Is our old farm was really inaccessible to customers. So this one, we're hoping to sort of build this site out, and I'll show you all that as that goes. But we are going to build this whole site out so that we can have more of our customers come and actually pick stuff up on the farm over the winter and over the summer, and that'd be a bigger part of our business, and maybe replace some of our markets and that sort of stuff. So yeah, we're very excited about it. I think, other than that, you all, like this video if you like this video. Make sure to subscribe to this channel. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you have anything that you'd be like, wow, that could use a whole video, why don't you address that? Let me know, and I will. Otherwise, thank you all for watching. Thanks Josh Satin for shooting it. We'll see you all later. Bye.
Oh, go ahead.
Lion face. Sorry. You're gonna have to give me a second. We have a lot of interesting things going on. I don't like this intro. Let me try it again. It's really pretty stuff though. What we've been doing for a long time is a lot, I hate that. Let me start that over. What's up? I talked about this a little bit in the...
Do it without laughing.
Duly noted. So this is the Hedge Wedge. I talked about this a little bit with Josh. Let's just do this again. Behind me is the...